Thanks for joining us for another Kickstarter Conniption.
Today we'll be talking about role-player adventures from Thunderworks Games.
And as always, we want to make sure that you are aware that our Kickstarter Conniption videos are sponsored in part by our Kickstarter backers and by the creators of this game. Studio 3, I'm Will Meadows.
I'm Sarah Meadows.
I'm Katie Pills.
And I'm Ryan Pills.
And today we're looking at role-player adventures from Thunderworks Games. This is from designers Keith Mateka, James Ryan, and Peter Ryan.
This is a 1 to 4 player dice rolling and manipulation adventure game that takes about an hour per scenario to play.
Thunderworks Games was kind enough to send us a prototype of the game, so let's take a look.
To set up the game, have each player select a character and class.
Or use your pre-generated role-player character.
Give each player their board, slide in your insert, and then fill in your stats.
Fill the stamina slots with the correct amount for each stat.
Give each player their starting market cards, and then you'll be ready to jump in.
Find the next scenario in the booklet and follow the setup for the map, placing encounters and experience points out on the board.
As members of the King's Guard, your team will set out on an adventure, choosing which directions to travel in, who to interact with, and what objects to use along the way.
Each player is equipped with unique abilities that they'll use as they work together, overcoming challenges and adversaries.
They may need to rest and reset before becoming exhausted.
Gaining XP and gold will allow you to upgrade your players and their possessions.
And key words that you collect along the way will unlock pathways previously inaccessible.
If your team is able to survive and fulfill their mission, they will be richly rewarded, just in time for their next adventure.
We've actually just wrapped up our second campaign of role-player adventures. This is an expansion to the role-player universe. If you've played the original role-player game, in that game you're using dice manipulation to build out your character. Fantastically enough, you can use those same characters in this version of the game. This resembles an RPG game, not quite. I'll let Ryan, who's the expert on that, give some thoughts in that arena. But it's kind of a choose-your-own-adventure experience. A lot of really neat stuff going on. Give us you guys' take. Ryan, what do you think? Tell us about roleplay.
It definitely has an RPG theme to it. Like a lot of campaign games, there's a book with some branching storylines that you will be going down. It does have a little bit of nuance to it where you are trying to gain favor with different factions. And as you gain favor with one faction, you might lose it with another. And that favor will come into play. For instance, we had favor with the king, and that gave us some extra stamina that we were able to use in some of our combats that we played. Something that players will want to note is that unlike a lot of these campaign story-driven board games, this one is not a tactical miniatures game. This is a deck-building, dice manipulation game. So it's a nice variation from what you might normally see. So that might be interesting to you. Also, something I thought was really cool that they tried to do is have it where those who've played Role Player can import the characters they made in Role Player to this game. And just the fact that it's incorporating the two games together and blending them, carrying over from one to the other. I thought that was a neat idea, and we'll have to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and even if you haven't played Role Player, there are plenty of characters to choose from. There are classes and races, plenty of things to get started with, and if you've never played an RPG, that's okay too, because it's kind of an in-between stepping stone. This, instead of an RPG being very open-ended, this one has a set story that if you go down this path and choose this thing instead of this thing, these things will happen and they will trigger other events to happen in the game. And everything is already laid out for you. You don't need a GM to help you. You have a book and the Tome of Adventures to help you along your story.
Yes, and there are neat items in this. You get items based on what you do and different encounters. You also get different titles. So you may get the title of the Troll Slayer. And as those decisions, things that you've made, so maybe we decided not to talk to the troll, we decided just to kill him, those type things will follow you into your next adventures. So as you're going down these paths, your past decisions are following you, which is what should happen in RPGs, but don't always. And so that is a really interesting part of this. It does have really fun and colorful storylines so far. Just the encounters that you have, things are described well. You get a really good idea of what the environment's like, what the people are like when you move into new areas. The book does a great job describing the scene for you.
And we're obviously looking at a prototype version of the game, but the artwork for it seemed really fantastic. The inset boards where you're keeping track of all your stamina with the slide-in pieces, a lot of really neat components going on. It'll be interesting to see what those all look like in the final campaign. Overall, I think it fits together really well on the table. We've only played through 2 of the scenarios. I think we have maybe a third one that came with the prototype. I'm sure there'll be more with the final game. 10 total in that. And plus I'm sure there'll be stretch goals and things like that. The dice rolling mechanic I felt was really interesting. Each player has their own set of cards that they can use to uniquely contribute to taking out different bad guys and adversaries and making decisions throughout the game. A lot of different options as you're playing through it.
Yeah, and it helps spread out so that you don't have one alpha player. Everyone's deck will need to contribute. You have one token that you can spend for someone to play a second card on an encounter, so everyone will need to be contributing. If you have one person doing all the work, you're probably not going to do very well in the game.
That is the truth.
And it does allow you to do a little bit of engine building. There's leather armor and runic armor, at least that I saw. And when you play one of those, it lets you play another card from the same set for free. So you can kind of focus on one type of armor to be able to play many cards at once without using those bonus play tokens. Also, I thought the story was very nuanced. I know I mentioned that before, but it's not just one of these multiple choice things where it's do I pick A or do I pick B. There are parts of the story where you have to use creative thinking with the item cards, because maybe I want to use this shovel and this strange silver ball here. Do I hit the ball with the shovel through a window, or
dig up some treasure on the beach?
Dig up some treasure. And so the different locations, you can use those items at any of the locations and the story will tell you what happens. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. We definitely missed some major bonuses that we could have played if we had just thought a little more creatively in the environment we were in.
Gonna just go back through round two. If you enjoy games like Monkey Island, this kind of reminded me of that a little bit. If you enjoy the original Role Player series, or if you enjoy light RPG games, then definitely check out Role Player Adventures from Thunderworks Games on Kickstarter, probably right now, or maybe you can get it in a late pledge. But I think that wraps it up. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Be sure to subscribe and give us some comments and questions in the comment section. We'll be happy to answer those. Until the next video, though, we'll see you next time. Got it.
Did it.
We've just wrapped up our second scenario of This is an RPG game, and then Ryan could be like, technically it's not.
It's not an RPG!
Nailed it!
Awesome.
Good job. Way to be quiet every 5 takes, Karen. Gwen, sorry.
It's okay, I do that all the time too. She's kind of snorting randomly in that though. Maybe she can't hear it.
I think we were.
It'll sound like I'm snorting.
Katie, we were